What up, yo? I am currently in the throes of actually scripting a video. I don't always do that, or for that matter, very often, but when the topic is sufficiently complicated, then I think it merits that. But I wanted to do a non scripted discussion right now of this whole idea of identity politics. Now, what brought this on was me reading a comment on a Thunderfoot video by none other than Sargon of Akkad. I have said in the past I have nothing against Sargon of Akkad. I think he's in a strange business, but it's neither here nor there. But I want to focus on what he said. He said, these people are cancer, in reference to these feminists such as Anita Sarkeesian. And then he says, identity politics seem designed to ruin any movement from the inside out. Okay. What I want to focus in on here is the identity of identity politics, specifically what all this jabberwocky is about identity politics. It's you hear it very often coming from people of conservative bent, and believe what you want. I'm neither conservative nor liberal. I've said this many times, and I think I've demonstrated this over the years with my views, and even tend to be more sympathetic to the libertarian view. But this whole idea of identity politics is a question of just it's a bad approach, or it's fundamentally wrong. Now, I'm here to say that it's neither nor. You can't even, using terms such as, we got to get rid of identity politics. It's a non-starter to begin with. It's just a no-go. Why? People who bandy about this phrase, identity politics, as if it were a slur, are not taking into account, either willfully or unwittingly, the fact that human beings, as I've said so many times, are by nature tribalistic. We think in groups. We identify each other as members of groups, be it gender groups, ethnic groups, intellectual groups, and so on and so forth. Religious groups, one religion versus the other, Shias versus Sunnis, etc. I am totally on board with the idea that identity politics, in the sense of people being assigned group identity and then a great enmity being created from that, and then as a consequence, war, conflict, death, murder, blah, 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 or even for that matter, just unnecessary conflict arising. I'm on board with that. The problem is that rallying against it is a bit of an oxymoron. What do I mean by that? Everyone does it. That's the point, right? It's an oxymoron because the self-same people who are saying, get rid of identity politics, and can't have the identity politics, and everyone's an individual, nobody thinks that way. Nobody, on a subconscious level for that matter, actually engages in reality that way. Nobody, including myself, I try to take people on an individual basis as much as I can, but I'm, for better or worse, a human ape just as everyone else is. Nobody actually does this in practice. Everybody uses their knowledge, their awareness, their familiarity with the environment they've come to know, with other environments, etc., with the knowledge they've gained over life and the years, to make an assessment of one person or groups of persons. And whether it's just one person or the groups of persons, they will belong to some group. They will be assigned a group. That is how people operate. That is how people tick. And the irony, of course, is for the so-called conservatives, the people who constantly talk about this. I mean, they're all about identity politics. You're either with us or against us. You're either a member of our brand name of right-wing conservatism or you're not. And so it's ridiculous. And more to the point, what is the identity of identity politics? Well, it's just an abstraction. It's an abstraction that doesn't exist. It's I often use the term chimera, but that's exactly what it is. It's an abstraction because it has no foothold in reality whatsoever. Nobody in this world does not think in some sort of groupthink. Yes, we can do our best to try to think past that, but we have so many cognitive biases going into the world and then living this life that, yes, in the most extreme form, you'll have identity politics that can literally result in mass murder and genocide. We see this. We've seen this throughout the world. We've seen this in Indonesia. We've seen this in World War II. We've seen this in Turkey, and so on and so forth. Yeah, but and so to say, yeah, it's a bad thing that people think this way. It is, but what are we going to do? I think the best way to combat identity politics is to be aware that we are saddled with a very, very innate desire and automatic response, really, to reality, to group people into their respective group. I mean, nobody operates along the lines of, oh, this is an individual. You could say Mr. Smith goes into a job interview. Mr. Smith happens to be, to use American convention, 6'3". That's pretty tall. He has a pretty symmetrical face. His qualifications are decent, but I guess they could be better. And then Mr. Jones walks in. He's 5'8", better qualifications, slightly portly, and we can all make bets as to who's going to be hired. The point I'm making here is we have innate biases. What were these biases in this mock job interview I just described to you? Well, Mr. Smith fits the portfolio of the tall male. Tall men earn 15 to 20% more than their shorter equivalents, as well as having a symmetrical face. He looked, and I'm emphasizing the word looked the part of leadership. On the other hand, Mr. Jones, the short, portly guy, who's significantly better qualified, didn't look the part, even though he might, in his cranium, possess greater knowledge and aptitude for whatever the task at hand might be for the job. Were they being judged on an individual basis? Well, you can kind of say that, but not really, because you have a class of people, tall, symmetrically endowed men, facially endowed men, who are almost universally viewed on a subconscious level as more competent, more capable, better leaders. Whether that maps on reality or not is a completely separate issue, but we're talking about perception. And someone who, as far as the physical is concerned, as far as his perception is concerned, belonged to a different class of people. He was more qualified. Let's say this is IT. I was making this up. But he was short. He was portly. He didn't have that same... Even his clothing didn't bear the same markings of nobility as did Mr. Smith's. So right off the bat, people are not judging him on an individual basis. They are practicing a form of identity job politics because they have subconscious cues that they act upon. We see, tall person, tall man, symmetrical face, let's hire him. And they'd be right about this because this is the kind of person who, potentially, at least as far as relations to other companies in the outside world is concerned, they probably might be more profitable in the long run. But as I'm saying, this is not an individual judgment. This is placing people into categories. This is what we all do. I want to take people on an individual basis, but as has been demonstrated time and again on this channel and elsewhere, we can understand human beings by generalizing them, by putting them to groups. People will defy generalizations. I've cited numerous times how I am mathematically, compared to most men, probably inept, and yet when it comes to the world of letters, I think I'm more quote-unquote feminine, whatever that means. No, but I have greater aptitude for that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm in generalizing, say, men and women, saying men are more spatially talented and women are more verbally. I'm not even part of the spatially talented men, but the point I'm trying to make is you can still make the generalization and be accurate most of the time. And this is because, at least if your information is accurate, your generalizations probably will be spot on, and it will help you to understand the world and help guide you through the world. And even in the case of Mr. Smith, the tall, symmetrically faced guy, versus Mr. Jones, the short, portly guy, better qualified though. This is also a case of instinctively knowing what might be more beneficial to, say, a work environment or public relations. Clearly, the taller, quote-unquote, good-looking guy is going to be more beneficial. So, getting back to the main point, this is a phantasm. It is a chimera. The idea of identity politics as being something that is that can be eradicated, or even something that should be railed against. There's nothing you can do about it. We all do it. We all practice it. I mean, Sargon of Akkad does the exact same thing. I believe he's one of the conservative types, and so he falls into that group. And so he practiced identity politics with them. I mean, everyone does it, be it identity of ideas or identity of race or ethnicity or gender. The best thing we can do with respect to this whole identity politics bullshit is be aware of it, be aware of the fact that we're all doing it, we're all practicing it, that we're all practicing participants in group identity and assigning people to groups and being part of groups. And in light of that, make a conscious effort, but only in acknowledging that and realizing it and then internalizing that fact. It's so important. I've said it so many times, the difference between realization and internalization. Then you can try your best to judge people on an individual basis. But let's not lie to ourselves, as is convention. Let's not pretend that some people aren't doing it. Everyone does it. Everyone puts people into groups. That's the way human beings operate. It is innate, right? You can get around it, perhaps, but you can only get around it by acknowledging that there's a problem, right? What do they say in the 4-step problem, the correct alcoholism or drug abuse, right? The first step is to acknowledge that you have a problem. Well, if you only have a problem if you claim that some people are not affected or afflicted by quote-unquote identity politics. It is a chimera, it's an abstraction, it's a phantasm, and combating it is combating anything else that is simply not of substance. It's a fairy tale. It is the hallmark of idealism, I suppose. It's the set of ideals that people have striven for. Notice the past participle, striven, in recent centuries, the idea of the primacy of the individual over the group. And I'm on board with that to a very large degree as far as the philosophical implications, but the philosophical implications are not the same as the biological or the sociological. The biological and sociological implications are there because, well, they've been there for hundreds of thousands of years. We're not getting rid of that stuff anytime soon. We need to navigate it, and if we want to espouse an individualistic philosophy, which I would argue I do, then the best way to do it is by acknowledging that we are saddled with groupism, for lack of a better term. We are groupies. What are we going to do? Well, there's not much we can do, but the first step, as they say in getting rid of your alcoholism, is to acknowledge that there's a problem. Let's acknowledge that we all practice this identity politics. We're all groupies. We all do groupism. And then after that, we might consider ways of ameliorating that, or circumnavigating that, or improving it, or diminishing it, and what have you. But let's just not lie to ourselves and pretend this doesn't exist. Anita Sarkeesian's doing it. Sargon of Akkad's doing it. We're all doing it. And it's just a question of being intellectually honest. Everything becomes a matter of identity within group eventually. So what are you going to do? Sargon of Akkad. Anyway, that wasn't really addressed to him specifically, but he brought it up, and some people, such as the famous High King of Wales, they all go on about identity politics all the time when they are the most pernicious examples of people who practice quote-unquote identity politics. And totally unbeknownst to themselves, probably willfully, they're engaged in this massive muck of contradictions, and that needs to be pointed out. Anyway, thanks for watching. Scripted video is on its way. ETA, I couldn't tell you, but as always, may the gods watch over you and enjoy your weekend. Bye bye.